Black blizzards, they were called. Dark clouds reaching miles into the sky, churning millions of tons of dirt into torrents of destruction.
We could see this low cloud bank, it looked like. You could see it all the way across. And we watched that thing, and it got closer. It seemed to kind of grow, you know, it was getting closer. The ends of it would seem to sweep around. And you felt like, you know, you were surrounded. Finally, it would just close in on you, shut off all light. You couldn't see a thing.
And it kept getting worse and worse, the wind blowing harder and harder, and kept getting darker and darker. The old house just vibrating like it's going to blow away. And I started trying to see my hand. I kept bringing my hand up closer and closer and closer and closer, and I finally touched the end of my nose and I still couldn't see my hand. That's how black it was. A lot of people got out of the bed, got their children out of the bed, got down praying, thought that was it. They thought that was the end of the world.
Dust storms engulfed whole towns, ensnaring residents in a whirlwind of stinging, blinding dirt. Thousands would get sick from a mysterious illness. Scores would die.
When those dust storms blew and you were out in them, well, you spit out dirt. It looked like tobacco juice, only it was dirt.
When I'd see one of these black clouds rolling in, I remember thinking, why is it so dark? Why is it so dirty? What have I done now? What did we do to cause this?
Confident of rain, unmindful of wind, they plowed mile after mile of virgin sod. With the outbreak of World War I, Washington wanted wheat. Wheat would win the war. With record high prices, the promise of the land was coming true. Millions of acres of grassland would feel the plow for the first time. The race was on to turn every inch of the southern plains into profit. With a team of horses, a farmer could barely turn 3 acres of prairie sod in a day. With a tractor, he could plow 50. The great plow-up was underway. With so much bounty flowing from the southern plains, outsiders saw an opportunity to make a killing and began speculating on wheat. Suitcase farmers, they were called. Eastern bankers, businessmen, lawyers, who put in their seed and went home till harvest season.
They produced good. It looked like it's just a great thing that would never end. So they abused the land. They abused it something terrible. They raped it. They got everything out they could. And we don't think. We don't think. Except for ourselves, and it comes down to greed. You know, we're selfish and we want what we want, and we don't even think of what the end results might be.
I think that most of those people thought this is just what we might say hog heaven. It'll always be this way. So they kept breaking this country out. They plowed up a lot of country that should never have been plowed up. They got the whole country plowed up nearly. And that's about the time it turned off terribly dry.
Then in the summer of 1931, the rains stopped. Wheat withered in the fields, leaving the land naked and vulnerable to the menacing winds. But no one was prepared for what was to come.
The winds unleashed their fury with a force beyond my wildest imagination. It blew continuously for 100 hours, and it seemed as if the whole surface of the earth would be blown away. As far as my eyes could see, my fields were completely bare.
As dust enveloped the atmosphere, it got into the eyes, the nose, the mouth. Breathing became difficult. Where grain once grew high as a man's shoulder, dazed farmers walked out over their beaten, blown-out fields. It had taken 1,000 years to build an inch of topsoil on the southern plains. It took only minutes for one good blow to sweep it all away.
Well, after a dirt storm, the ground would just be bare where it had blown all the topsoil away, and then it would be mounds over where the fence rows had been. So we didn't have much except just bare old hard ground. It was a bad time.
100 million acres of the southern plains were turning into a wasteland. A circle encompassing large sections of 5 states in the nation's heartland. The panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, western Kansas, and the eastern portions of Colorado and New Mexico. A journalist traveling through the region called it the Dust Bowl. Convinced that the storms were a freak accident, that the rains would soon return, residents could not imagine that they had entered a battle that would last a decade.
The next morning, they'd still have that dust settling in the air, but there would be the sunshine and all again, but then everything would just be covered in dirt. Everything was full of dust. If you were cooking a meal, you'd end up with dust in your food, and you would feel it in your teeth. You'd start to eat, and when you would drink water or something, you would grit down, and you always felt like you had grit between your teeth, you know. It felt terrible.
The dust was just like face powder. It was so heavy and thick. It wasn't like sand. It was just real heavy, like face powder, only it was real dark, almost black.
To the astonishment of residents, the dust kept coming. In 1932, the Weather Bureau reported 14 dust storms. The next year, the number climbed to 38. People tried to protect themselves by hanging wet sheets in front of doorways and windows to filter the dirt. They stuffed window frames with gum tape and rags. But keeping the fine particles out was impossible. The dust permeated the tiniest cracks and crevices.
We just had a lot of dirt. I just grew up with it and thought that's what life was all about.